They rose from earth like a vow hammered into the horizon belts of stone, brick, and packed soil, stepping outward in measured pride. A crown that learned to breathe salt wind and outlast emperors. Mortar tasted of lime and sweat. Tower faces wore the pale scars of centuries. Gate arches exhaled cool breath, where pilgrims pressed their foreheads to pitted ashlar. Bells carried along the crenels on bright mornings, and the city felt the vibration in its ribs, a reassurance older than any oath. A ritual of safety made tangible in joint, hinge, and seam. To look upon these lines was to read a scripture written in geometry, a theology of angles and ditches that promised no tide shall pass. Yet at the edge of sight, the sea grew to iron in the imagination, and the air learned a new rumor, the far-off grammar of measured thunder, something metal preparing to argue with masonry. The walls listened, as walls do, through dust and echo, feeling their own age within their joints, and the city, trusting as ever, held its breath. This is the duel's beginning, faith-wrought stone, awaiting engineered thunder. He came thin with hunger and thick with designs. A wanderer whose sketches outgrew the wallets of petty courts. Carrying an alphabet of circles and measures, no patron would finish reading. Scarcity taught him audacity, bronze by the ton, powder by the mule train, crews by the dozen. All yoked to a throat of metal, he swore, could speak farther than any bell. At Eternity's heart, he found the one listener who counted in horizons. Mehmed's gaze moved like a compass over maps, hearing in Orban's drawings not a boast, but a system. The bargain sealed itself in logistics roads graded, oxen, talid, charcoal stacked like black bricks of winter, bell metal summoned from sanctuaries whose echoes would be poured into new mouths. The foundry became a temple of heat and arithmetic crucibles, glaring, molds tamped by mallets, cords of hemp singing as men, tilted ladles bright as small suns. Numbers walked the floor as quietly as priests board a windage, charged to stress, cooling hours to temper, while hammers told a liturgy that melted prayer into alloy. When the halves were cast and married with red-hot pins, when bands hugged the green bronze like vows, the barrel lay breathing steam. A newborn leviathan streaked with slag and sanctity. Crews polished its skin until it took the light like water. Carpenters cradled it on timbered beds. Powdermen rehearsed a future in measured scoops. The sultan watched the weights and distances align into a sentence only iron could pronounce, and the engineer traced its punctuation in rivet and ring. The Basilica's birth was a covenant written in bronze, and every clause promised ruin for stone. At the map table, the 19-year-old bends coastline and hills into arithmetic, translating bastions into angles and ditches into timing. His fingers moving across wax boards where neat columns of figures tether distance to charge, elevation to hour, and a city's pulse to a schedule of shock. Beyond the tent, he causes movement to exist where there was only potential oxen lines strung like veins across mud. Cart convoys ticking from magazine to battery, powder allotments metered by ledger and seal, pontoon bridges folding rivers into roads, and earthworks rising in paced intervals so that the guns do not travel alone, but inside a body he has designed. Doctrine hardens in the cool of morning calibration tables pinned to stakes. Crews drilled until swab, worm, tamp, and run out become a single gesture. Spares arrayed by weight and need, cooling rotations enforced like prayer hours. Repair teams waiting with wedges, rings, and water until thunder submits to cadence and timekeepers. When the guns finally speak, they do so inside his quiet grammar, each report answering a number already written, and the siege tilts not by miracle or fury, but by an equation settling into balance from now on. Numbers, not prayers, will decide the hours ahead. Wax weeps down tapers as domes take a faint, star-salted sheen, and the air moves like slow incense. Warm with bodies and the resin-sour bite of myrrh, low chant travels along marble like a tide, brushing mosaics and shadowed capitals, while footfalls thrum a second rhythm beneath the hymns. Constantine XI passes through the murmuring corridors with a stillness that steadies lanterns. And beside the gates, Giustiniani stands plated and patient. His presence, a hinge between ceremony and steel, bells speak in tempered intervals. Measuring the dark, rumor runs faster than the processions. A scatter of sparks shivering through markets and courtyards, ships sighted, torches multiplied, the ground itself learning to tremble. Some swear the sky coughed twice at sunset, others taste grit where no wind blows. Priests lift icons over bowed helmets, women touch the stone like a reliquary, boys carry baskets of sand as if cradling relics. The city becomes one breathing thing, lungs of smoke and song, trying to make belief into thickness, yet beneath the chant comes a thinner music, a far arithmetic tapping the horizon. And the candles seem to falter at sounds not yet audible. The shield of prayer holds high, but the night smells of iron. The liturgy is only prelude. Stillness presses against the gate of St. Rubel. Romanus, a held breath in stone, dew beads on merlons, and the air tastes like cold iron and lime. Then the first report arrives as pressure before sound, a shove through the lungs that turns the morning thin, followed by a thunderclap that smashes the skyline into shards. Men flinch as a black sphere shoulders the distance and the wall answers masonry, flexing like a rib cage. Clamps groaning, mortar sighing out a pale ghost, as joints take the blow. Dust older than dynasties lifts at once and coats tongues. A bitter sacrament. The shock wave travels through crenels and bone, helmets ring like bowls. Vision jumps, rebooting into a rain of grit and pebbled lime. Hands grope for merlons that feel suddenly soft, fingers sinking into seams where powder has replaced cement. Pigeons burst from ledges in white panic, and the wooden platforms underfoot quiver with a repressed scream. Somewhere a bell misstrikes, the note slurring in its own echo, as if the metal forgot its pitch. Silence attempts a return and fails. The air is now a drumhead, quivering for the next stick. The city swallows, the men taste stone, and the wall learns its first clean lesson in fear. Night turns the breach into a ward. Under care, torches hiss. Pulleys creak. Ropes rasp. And whispered orders pass like pulses along the parapet. Wicker gabions thump into place. Bellies of earth and sand packed hard by blistered palms. Timber splints bite across fractured faces. Wedged tight, where joints have forgotten how to hold. Wet mortar breathes lime into the cold. A chalky fog that coats teeth. Rubble is sifted, lifted, poured, and tamped until the wound looks less like a mouth and more like a scar. The wall, bound and bandaged, seems to draw a steadier breath. Dawn finds the work shining with dew. Seems neat. Angles reasserted. A geometry pretending to be itself again. Men lean their weight against the cured places and feel a promise under their fingers. Thin but present. And for an hour, the city allows itself the small courage of breakfast. By noon, the guns return with remembered purpose. Shells, walking the same distances in the same measures. Touching every weakness they left behind, like a scholar reciting proofs. The new timber shakes. The gabions, cough earth. Mortar sighs apart along yesterday's lines. And dust rises with the weary intimacy of recognition. The cycle fixes itself to time like a clock mend. Unmake. Repeat. The wall's healing is only intermission for the cannon's encore. Wedges are tapped until the carriage settles like a beast at squat. trails inched with pry bars, while palms signal hush, and fuses are pinched shorter by a thumb's width. A grammar of corrections spoken in brass shims, marks, and breath held to the count. The line of guns creeps under mantlets in raw earth, gabions rolled forward on squeaking axles, carts feeding powder like black grain, water skins passing hand to hand for sponges, spare pins and bands laid out on canvas, the way surgeons array steel. Behind them, teams rake new ramps, wijde groofs, and tie the batteries to roads that did not exist at dawn. Crews sight not by pristine parapets, but by the broken teeth of merlins, plotting angles from ruin to ruin, lenses and knotted cords turning yesterday's shatter into today's range, while a scribe scratches columns where each burst, short or long, becomes a figure to be solved. Measured inches win ground more surely than charges. And the wall, nailed to its own foundation, can only watch as motion itself sharpens into a weapon it cannot mirror. Darkness compresses to breath and wax, the tunnel's air tasting of clay and old water as candles gutter into small, stubborn halos. Soil presses close enough to hear it think. Grit salts tongues, the hiss of lamps in the slow, fretful creak of timbers count the seconds like teeth. Picks speak in pulses. Shovels answer. And every pause becomes an ear laid to earth, translating faint tremors into lines on a mental map no daylight will ever see. Listening posts sprout in the loam slits, stakes, and strings braided to catch a rumor of motion while props thud into place. The ceiling settling with a tired sigh. A brace set true steals an inch of life. A wick trimmed buys another breath. Then vibration fattens another team. Close. Their blows braided with yours, until the seam between enemies is only damp soil and heartbeat. Countermines grope forward and find the flank. Wood braces meet fire or flood. Hot smoke turns lungs to cloth and the floor lurches underfoot. The wall above keeps its face, but its roots shake. The ground itself is a battlefield, and the city's safety begins below it now. Horns rip the dark and torches ladder the air with smoke. And then the clatter begins iron on stone. Hooks kissing crenels. Ladders raking the battered curtain near St. Labrevance. Romanus. The first wave hits like weather shields rise. Pikes set. Bodies heave upward. Boots, searching purchase on splintered rungs, slick with pitch. Sparks hive along the merlins as steel teeth worry the parapet. And the night breathes in ragged gulps, lit by fire, and the quicksilver of blades, Giustiniani's line locks, plates and rivets making a second wall behind the first, a hinge of discipline that turns impact into recoil. Pikes bite into laddermen and shove them backward in jerks. Shields close like shutters. And the rhythm becomes labor thrust. Brace. Step measured by grunts and the scrape of greaves. Torque scooter. Smoke crawls low, and the platform trembles under a slurry of ash. Splinters and blood, angles that once sheltered, now trap. Broken stairs channel men into chutes where gravity joins the defenders, and every gap demands a body to fill it. Reliefs rotate by handfuls. Mouths taste iron and old dust. Arms throb to a dull metronome. Dawn does not soften, only makes the wounds legible. The line stands, but the men behind it are thinning, and the wall survives the night by spending the city's living coin. Iron lay across water like a law, links thick as a man's wrist sleeping between towers. The golden horn's chain holding current and confidence in one long, armored thought. It hummed when tide pressed, and ships tested it with timid noses. A music of restraint the city trusted as a second wall, bright with tar and hammered pride. Lanterns on the quays flickered over its black curve. Guards walked its shadow and believed the sea itself had agreed to stop. Far off, another kind of agreement gathered. Planks were laid in ranks like ribs, rollers greased until they smoked, ropes snaked through capstans and ox yokes, and men with shoulders raw from harness found a rhythm older than oars. Hulls climbed onto land with groans of timber on timber. Keelsons grinding the earth as if scoring a new river. Pitch steamed, mallets told. Overseers counted beats until wood, rope, and bone moved as one procession of will. Hills became slipways under the night. At dawn, the improbable resolved into geometry. Masts pricked the golden horn behind the chain. Pennants stirring in a wind they were never meant to meet. Oars bit inside the harbor's calm, like teeth behind a smile. And the city felt its heart turn backward in its chest. Morale buckled where faith in iron had stood. The sea had learned to climb hills. Parchment crackles in lamplight. Quills rasp, and wax beads harden like small red hearts as couriers thread the night streets, with packets stamped for Venice, for Genoa, for the West that measures its compassion in tonnage. Oaths are translated into itineraries, promises into sailing windows. Merchants weigh saints against spice, and every plea must survive the math of wind, risk, and profit before it can grow a mast. In distant counting houses, ledgers blink awake, commitments hedge into contingencies. Hulls stall on tides that answer to the moon, not to prayers, while harbors offer only flags of weather and the steady indifference of gulls. Constantine counts days like coins and hears them thin in his palm. Until hope reveals its decimal, the ledger of allies will not balance in time. Heat lifts from the barrel and shimmers. A mirage of war. Seams begin to sing, high and thin, before the note snaps and a pin shears like a tooth. Recoil hammers the carriage back into its own ruts. Staves burst. Crews stagger with arms buzzing to the elbow. Breaths tasting of salt and copper. The bronze's skin blooms hairline crescents, a constellation of fatigue. Steam spits where swab water kisses heat, and the great throat wheezes smoke as if it had lungs. Then the repair liturgy begins. Buckets run, wet hides slap and hiss. Wedges are driven home in a staccato psalm. Smiths arrive with tongs and rings. Carpenters with braces and new cheeks. Armorers with pins bright as needles. Hammers knit a rough heartbeat around the wound. Bands are heated, hammered, and seated until they grip like vows. Lashings are renewed. The vent is reamed and dressed with a surgeon's patience. Charges step down, then climb again by careful grains. Cool down rotates by hourglass. Spares are laid out like organs on linen. By sunset, the monster lies steadier. Its scars teaching it where to carry strain. When it speaks again, it speaks better. Technology fails forward. The wall now fights a student of its own recoil. Shock enters as geometry and leaves as fracture impact cones widen through the core, translating roundness into wedges of force that pry at joints meant to sleep. Mortar surrenders its memory first, turning to talc beneath the skins of brick. Faces sheer, their thin red veneers sloughing like scabs. Bonding courses step out of line by a finger's breadth. Then a hand's. Timber braces groan. Clamps complain in a dull, tired music. The earth behind the curtain exhales and will not draw breath back in. Angles betray their promise. Arrow slits lengthen into mouths. Firing ledges tilt from platforms into slides. The counterscarp slumps, spilling its neat profile into a soft, treacherous slope. What once deflected now invites, funnels, conducts an architecture reversing its verbs under the grammar of shock. Men work inside the diagnosis. Wheelbarrows count hope by loads. Wicker bellies sag with spoil. Stakes bite clay that refuses to hold the line it held at dawn. A level tells the truth, No prayer can interrupt a degree, more tilt, an inch more creep. The patient answers every stitch by opening elsewhere. By evening, repair is triage spoken in lime and sweat. And the wall patient, venerable, speaks a new language fluently. It has learned the grammar of its own undoing. Icons drift like small galaxies through courtyards, candles cupped against a bruised sky, and hymns run along cloisters in low rivers of breath. Vestments move as if underwater, hems brushing stone, brightened by wax tears, and the air smells of frankincense braided with lime. The city rehearses its oldest choreography procession, bow, kiss of relic, while bells measure the cloud bank of dusk. Then percussion writes itself across the liturgy, a roll of force, rakes, roofs, and eaves. The nave inhales dust as if the building were a lung, and chant kinks into coughs that settle into echoes along the aisles. Frescoes craze with fine white veins, plaster lets go like pale snow. The floor reports a brief shiver through soles as if a giant finger had tapped the ground. Ritual persists. But each gesture must share space with concussion hands, make the sign, then steady on a column. A censer swings, then stutters mid-arc. A child's candle gutters and is cupped back to life with soot-blackened fingers. Smoke ropes climb and dissolve in the same instant. Wax beads shine and tremble. The choir finds the note again and loses it to another pressure. Wave, incense hangs in glorious order. But sound rearranges faith line by line. And the day's dominant homily arrives without words. Thunder has become the city's new liturgist. The 29th of May 1453, the city wakes to a hush that feels like held breath, and Hagia Sophia gathers it in confession lines, coil beneath domes, wax gleams on stone, and cold nave air turns prayer into fog. Soldiers kiss thresholds with salt-dry lips, bronze edges tasting of iron and sweat. Priests lift hands over bowed helmets, oil tracing small suns on dented crowns. Footfalls are soft, measured. The floor keeps their secrets. Beyond the domes, the outer plane stirs in an obedience of lines. Standards uncoil like waking serpents. Ranks lengthen, narrow. Lock, drums, test the morning and fall silent again. Spears incline as if sensing gravity's coming task. Within and without, two wills align without words. Breath waits between prayer and trumpet. Dawn is the verdict hour. Dust drifts down the broken merlons like slow ash. And the city listens to a hush that feels like a verdict written in pale air. Bells hang mute. Gulls wheel over weeded ditches. And mortar dust lies on thresholds like the last thin snow of an old winter. Carts arrive with the patience of tides. Wheels squeaking. Men prying dressed stones from their beds and stacking them on planks. Chips of marble ping under hammers. Inscriptions turn inward, and the old wall begins its second life as steps, lintels, and roads for a different future. The duel's conclusion stands plain. Technology dethrones geography. Sovereignty migrates from walls to weapons. And a world ordered by ramparts yields to a world calibrated by artillery. The modern age enters as a bronze echo that does not fade,